polarization serves the dragon. And when I say the dragon here, I'm talking about the series of game theory forces that make up our system, where that includes the economic system, governance system, and knowledge system. And this channel, of course, is all about paradigm shifts in those three things, where the dragon itself, the current system, is not serving human values well. It's degrading ecosystems. It's got this power to the powerful dynamic, which is cancerous. It allows large-scale institutions to become cancerous to the system as a whole. So the question is, what could be done about that thing? And in this video, I would like to present an idea that will become part of my Dragon series, that is the notion of atomic collaboration. And if that sounds squishy and feely and life gets, let's all just get along, it is not that. As a matter of fact, it is almost the opposite of that. The kind of collaboration I will propose here will involve more conflict, more risk, more vulnerability. And I heard somebody say once that World War II was the physics war. It was the war where the atomic bomb was the deciding factor of that war. And the same person said World War III is the social sciences war. It's all about sort of strategic acting on the population, their perception of reality, their perception of what's valid and invalid in institutions, that kind of thing. And I am convinced the atomic collaboration of the style I'll describe here will be the key to overcoming the enemy of World War III, which is the dragon. Now, let me give a brief explanation about how this works using the imagery of the dragon, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail, although this whole video will be a little bit conceptual, and I do hope to flesh it out with more concrete examples in future videos. But here we have the image of the dragon with many, many different arms. And yet the arms are sort of in pairs. It's not that they're exactly one pair and another pair. It's that some arms work well in opposition to the three arms right across the chest from it. And any pair of arms is going to have opposition. There's going to be energy directed between these two arms. Now, what is an arm here? What am I conceptualizing as an arm of the dragon? It's going to be a group of people who have a shared worldview, a shared news feed, a shared set of things that they care about, that they invest in, and a shared enemy, a shared set of people that they are against, that they direct actual adversarial energy against those people. And of course, that's what's going to be the arm across the body of the dragon, is the people that they oppose. So this is groups that actually have energy directed in opposing each other. That's a pair of arms. Now, of course, you zoom back and look at the whole dragon, and what you see is actually any pair of arms that is in opposition is actually working together to accomplish the goals of the dragon. That's the way it appears from the meta perspective. And yet you zoom in really closely to one of these arms and listen to the people in that group. They are actually accurately perceiving that the other group is serving the dragon's interests. They can clearly and accurately and profoundly say, those people are serving the dragon's interest, here's how, here's why, here's how it works. And yet they cannot see how their own group is serving the dragon's interest. And you look across the body at the arm opposing them, and that arm can look at them and say, I see exactly how those people are serving the dragon's interests, but they cannot see how their own group is. And so what is atomic collaboration? Atomic collaboration is directing the adversarial energy not across the body at that other arm, but instead at your own group. And this does not mean shaming your own group and wagging your finger at them. It means appreciating everything that they have to bring, recognizing the tool set that they bring to the table for fighting the dragon and bringing about good in the world, but also recognizing, wait a second, this particular thing is serving the dragon. And you can get that by talking across these groups, by actually listening closely enough to hear the critiques of your group in a way that probably needs to be communicated with grace and not with shaming. So that is the general gist of atomic collaboration. Now, to go a little deeper, I want to pull in a sports analogy, where you have the rules of the game and the referee, and that, of course, is the game theory of the dragon as a whole. And you have these two teams that are opposing each other and scoring points against one another. And the key to killing the dragon, the key to changing the structure of the system, is going to be changing the rules of the game, the referees, all of that. But each team is so addicted to the scoring of points, and oftentimes a team can tell when they're about to score a point. They don't want to change the game when they're about to score against that other team. So if the call to battle is always, wait, don't change the game until we get this little last point against that other team, then the game continues forever. There has to be a collaboration between the teams to be like, wait a second, the rules of the actual game need to be changed. And to think a little more about how this works in practice, we might imagine two teams, two arms, where we have an orange arm and a purple arm. And within each of these arms, there are going to be things they believe, things they want to do, ways they want to act in the world that are actually kind of useful to the dragon, and other ways they want to act in the world and things they want to do that are definitely in opposition to the dragon's interests. And the key with the dragon as refereed, the dragon as the structure of the game, is the dragon is able to lift up the parts of that group that serve its interests and push down parts of that group, or disempower parts of that group that oppose its interests. Moreover, the dragon can use the other team and the possibility of the other team gaining power in some realm as a threat to make sure the group lifts up the useful parts and suppresses the unuseful parts of the dragon's interest. And if the purple team is well behaved according to the dragon's interests, that purple team might actually rise a little in power. But if parts of that purple team that oppose the dragon's interests start to become too strong within that coalition, the dragon has this orange team, and maybe it's also got a whole bunch of other colors waiting in line to take over that position of power, and that the threat of that might keep the purple team in line, or maybe just the purple team is starting to oppose the dragon, and you can just displace the purple team in that role of power with one of the opposing teams that is behaving better, or that is willing to emphasize the parts of their team's hopes that serve the dragon's interest and de-emphasize the parts that are inconvenient. That is the game. That is the structure of the game, where the points against each other are the focus of people's adversarial energy. But the forces that raise up power and suppress power, that's the structure of the game that needs to be changed and redirected. And that can only happen by these opposing arms of the dragon coming together to change the rules of the game. In other words, the forces lifting up and suppressing. And examples of this lifting up and lowering down include things like investing more money into a business so that its size expands, or disinvesting so that it has to contract. Within, say, a government agency or a corporation, that could be investing more staff in a particular department, or pulling staff out of a particular department to shrink it. Lowering, in this case, could involve initiating a lawsuit, or it could involve attacking the reputation of a leader of a particular movement. That would be one way of sort of divesting that particular group's power and interest and influence. Money is often involved in the lifting up and lowering down here, but not always. The dragon is actually really strategic at leveraging all different types of power to accomplish its goals. But I'm not going to go into any more detail than that about how exactly the dragon expands or contracts these different groups. This video is really a high-level overview of some of these dynamics. Now, what is the deal with the dragon using adversarial energy between these groups for the dragon's purposes? How do we even think about that? And to begin with, I think we want to think about adversarial energy as being a real source of energy. There's drive, there's creativity, there's this moral force behind it that is in some ways way more powerful than if you just pay somebody to accomplish some series of tasks. You pay somebody and you say, you need to do this, this, and this. The motivational drive behind that is there, but it's not strong. Whereas you give somebody the opportunity to actually enact adversarial power against something that that person sees as being morally wrong. That person will be strategic and creative. They will put the full force of their human energy behind that. And if you think about sort of the history of, say, physics and the physics style energy, like the style of energy in a light bulb, or the way oil can be turned into the energy that drives your car. At some point, people had to realize, wait a second, energy as a force, it's invisible. At least it's invisible from many vantage points, but it is so real and needs to be thought of as real. And in a lot of ways, I think adversarial energy and different types of energy that drive people need to be considered if we want to properly understand our economic system. So how does the dragon actually use this adversarial energy? And to think about that, we might imagine the orange group having a little bit of power inside the system, where the orange group has been doing some of the bidding of the dragon, and yet there is part of the orange group that sees the problems with the dragon, that wants to fight the bad behavior of the dragon. Both of these parts are wrapped up in the orange group. So the question is, what can the dragon do about that disobedient part of the orange group? And there's going to be two strategies here. The first line of strategy is going to be to give that orange group that wants to fight the dragon some pet projects that the orange group can just go and work on those pet projects that'll maybe make a little bit of headway, but not very much, and they don't really matter in the big scheme of things. If you can give that disobedient, that anti-dragon part of the orange group something that will redirect their energy toward a small pet project, that is the easiest way of dealing with that particular group of the orange group. But let's say that doesn't work. Let's say the orange group maybe puts a little energy into the pet project, but they're still going up against the dragon in a meaningful way. What can the dragon do at that point? And this is, of course, where the adversarial energy from the purple group comes into play. So the dragon can empower the purple group that has so much pent-up energy against the orange group for all of the bad things the orange group is doing. And if you can empower that, the purple group will be able to disempower, go after, delegitimize, etc., 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 the orange group. And I should say this is definitely not just about the left-right political spectrum. In fact, most of the places where this strategy by the dragon is actually implemented, it's probably not left and right in the classic sense of those words politically. Now, I do think the habits we form about speaking across difference, those are oftentimes formed in the online environment where we learn how to treat somebody we disagree with, and that kind of bleeds over into our work lives and our family lives. But I do think the dragon uses this strategy inside institutions where the disagreement going on may have nothing to do with anything politically left or right. It's just that people are disagreeing inside the institution, and the dragon uses this dynamic of adversarial energy in the way I've described. Now, I want to point out that this strategy on the part of the dragon has a brilliance to it. Because, of course, the dragon needs to move and shift and play judo against the mass frustration that sometimes riles up against the dragon. There are lots of forces that do oppose the dragon. So the dragon needs many possible strategies for opposing those forces that oppose its interests. And having so many different arms that it could lift up or lower down at any given moment according to what's needed in the situation, that is incredibly useful from an evolutionary standpoint. I should also say that even though I am making the case that the dragon acts strategically in its own interest, this does not require any actors or any groups who are actually doing that acting. This will happen naturally, and those are for reasons that I hope to explain in my dragon series as a whole, but I won't explain fully in this video. And it is this particular evolutionary strategy of the dragon that makes this moment in history different from wars of the past. Because what's tended to happen in the past is there's been these opposing groups, these opposing arms, with each trying to get their religion or their ideology on top and their ideology to win. And it was a battle between which of the groups had more power to overcome the other group. And of course, once that group won with their power, they were able to cast straw man mythologies onto the other group, suppress the other group for long enough to let that group wither away and die. That was sort of the thing of the past. But any sort of strategy of that style, where it is ideology versus ideology or religion versus religion, will not work, because the strategy of the dragon that uses many different religions and ideologies, that strategy dominates. That strategy is actually more powerful. So using power to make sure your religion and ideology is what's propagated and not their ideology, that will not work this time around. So how do we get out from under the thumb of this kind of dragon? And my answer, of course, is this notion of atomic collaboration, which is not squishy-feely. And I want to explain a little bit more why that is not the case. And the reason is, if you're redirecting your adversarial energies away from your enemy or your opposition and toward people in your in-group who are your friends, who you care about, who currently have a lot of camaraderie with you against that enemy, and you're turning instead your adversarial energy to the person you like and understand and know, that could actually ruin relationships you really care about. It's you confronting somebody that you understand and you know and you like. That brings so much more actual conflict than the conflict that happens from a distance, where it's you winning in your mind by slamming them through some argument you're making that never actually reaches them. They never actually hear the arguments you're making that they are feeding the dragon, because they have so many defense mechanisms built in to stop them from hearing that. And your group has the same type of defense mechanisms built into the way you think and the way you can't hear their arguments about how you are serving the dragon. And when directed at the in-group, the adversarial energy has a completely different style, a completely different attitude. It's not shaking the finger and putting them in their place, and it's not this arrogant, self-righteous thing that is the core of social media right now. When you're directing adversarial energy at your in-group, you're not going to confront them every time they say something that is a little bit in the wrong direction. You're going to mostly uplift them and instead confront them gently in ways that you know they can hear, because you know who they are as people. You understand how they think. You understand the discernment of what is good and what is bad about their whole worldview in a way that somebody in that other group cannot understand. Now, for this to happen, there actually does need to be communication and collaboration between groups that are at odds with each other. Because the group who is opposed to you, they can actually see way more clearly than you can the ways your group is contributing to the problem. Your group has this built-in blindness to that. And it kind of parallels the same thing you see with individuals, where people are blind to their own character flaws, but super sensitive to the character flaws of other people. And people can generally see the character flaws in others that are most representative of the ones in themselves. They just cannot see it in themselves. The same is true at a group level, and that's the phenomenon we're tapping into by redirecting the adversarial energy. And if we ask who has the authority to confront somebody in their in-group, this is not just any member of the in-group who can do this. It's not about affinity, it's not about membership of the in-group. It's really about orientation and relationship with that in-group. The people who can actually confront their own are people who value people in their in-group, who pay the kind of attention to that in-group that is meaningful, that sees their potential, that sees their real value. And if your orientation is positive in that way, you have a way that you can confront your in-group in a way that somebody who might be a member of your in-group but doesn't really orient themselves, doesn't really invest in that positive-oriented relationship could not. Now, I should say, actually implementing this is going to require institutions. It's going to require the bottom-up development of new styles of institutions. And I'm not going to fully explain that in this video. It's a whole bigger topic I'll cover in other videos. But it kind of relates to the notion that we cannot police everybody in our in-group online. That's not a reasonable thing. It's not a healthy thing to try to do. That task is going to suck energy away from the actual mission. So what will be needed is groups of people who self-select into an institution where they agree to be held accountable to good behavior for people in their in-group. And that sort of setting will lend itself to this kind of atomic collaboration.